2 years after my husband died, a lawyer called me and said, "I found a hidden envelope he left." I was folding a towel when the phone rang. Not his work phone, not the cell phone my daughter bought me that I barely understand. The landline, the one that sits on the kitchen counter next to the ceramic chicken salt shaker he bought me from a flea market in Pennsylvania 30 years ago. That phone. It was a Tuesday, 10:16 in the morning. I remember because I had just put a second cup of coffee in the microwave, and the clock on the stove was blinking 12:00 again because I still don't know how to set it, even though he showed me 100 times. I let it ring twice while I finished the fold. A white towel, the good ones from Bed Bath & Beyond. The ones he used to complain were too rough on his face. The voice on the other end was a woman, young, professional. She said her name was Michelle, and she was from a law firm I had never heard of, Peterson & Associates. She asked if I was Eleanor Margaret Howe. I said yes, but no one calls me Eleanor. Everyone calls me Ellie. She said, "Miss Howe, I apologize for calling so long after the fact, but we have come across some documents that we believe belong to your late husband." My hand stopped on the towel. The second towel, the blue one. My husband had been dead for 26 months. 2 years and 2 months to be exact. The aneurysm took him on a Sunday afternoon while he was watching golf. Just fell asleep in his recliner and never opened his eyes again. The funeral was small, 47 people. I counted. I remember thinking 47 seemed like such an odd number for a man who had worked at the same insurance company for 38 years. Michelle from Peterson & Associates said they had been going through some old storage boxes from a retired partner who had recently passed away, and inside one of those boxes they found a sealed envelope with my name on it, handwritten in my husband's handwriting, dated 7 years ago. She asked if I wanted her to mail it or if I preferred to come pick it up in person. I said mail it. Then I hung up and stood in my kitchen with the blue towel half folded, and I felt the strangest thing. Not sadness, not curiosity, just a cold, empty space in my chest that felt like someone had reached in and scooped out a spoonful of something I didn't even know was still there. My husband's name was Richard, Dick to his friends, Rich to his coworkers, Daddy to our 2 daughters. I called him Richard, even after 43 years of marriage, even after 2 children and 3 grandchildren, and a dog that died, and a house that we bought for $39,000 and sold for $340,000. I called him Richard, and I thought I knew everything about him. I thought that was the one thing I could count on in a world that had taken my mother and my father and my sister Carol and my best friend from high school and my knees and my memory for where I put my reading glasses. I thought I knew Richard. I thought I knew the man who snored so loud I slept in the guest room for the last 12 years of our marriage. The man who ate the same thing for breakfast every morning for 43 years. 1 egg over easy, 10 slices of toast, grape jelly. Never strawberry, never blackberry. Grape. The man who cried at the end of Field of Dreams every single time. The man who held my hand in the hospital when our first daughter was born and said, "She looks just like you, thank God," because my nose would be a tragedy on a little girl. I thought I knew him. The envelope came 3 days later. Brown paper, legal size. My name written in that slanted cursive he used when he wanted to be formal. The kind of handwriting he only used on greeting cards and checks. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter, dated March 12th, 7 years before he died. And tucked behind the letter was a smaller envelope, cream-colored, the kind you would use for a wedding invitation. No name on the outside, just a red wax seal with a crest I didn't recognize. I opened the letter first. It said, "Dear Ellie, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am sorry. There is something I never told you, something I should have told you 30 years ago. I have attached something for you to read. After you read it, you will understand why I could never say the words out loud. I love you. I have always loved you. But love is not the same as truth, and I was too much of a coward to give you both." Richard, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where we ate Thanksgiving dinner for 30 years, the same table where I taught my daughters to write their names, the same table where Richard proposed to me with a ring he saved 3 months to buy. I sat there and I looked at that cream-colored envelope, and I thought about throwing it in the trash. I thought about putting it in the fireplace. I thought about calling my daughter Sarah and asking her what to do, because Sarah was the smart one, the one with the law degree, the one who always said, "Mom, you need to stop being so naive about people." But I didn't call anyone. I opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph, old, yellowed at the edges, the kind of photograph that came from a disposable camera, or maybe one of those Kodak machines at the drugstore. It was a picture of a woman, a young woman. She had dark hair, long, down to her shoulders, and she was holding a baby, a newborn, wrapped in a yellow blanket, and she was standing in front of a house, a small house, blue shutters, a mailbox with a flag that was up, and on the back of the photograph in my husband's handwriting were 3 words. Her name was Margaret. I didn't recognize the woman. I didn't recognize the house. But I recognized the blanket, the yellow blanket with the white trim, because I had that same blanket. I had it in a box in the attic. My mother gave it to me when Sarah was born, and I had wrapped both of my daughters in that blanket in the hospital. I had wrapped my first granddaughter in that blanket. So I sat at my kitchen table with a photograph of a woman I had never met, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket that belonged to my family, and I felt the floor fall out from under me. I must have sat there for an hour, maybe 2. The coffee in my microwave went cold. The phone rang twice. I didn't answer. The mail came. I heard the slot open and close. A man named Margaret. Not a woman. A baby. A baby named Margaret. My husband had written her name on the back of a photograph. Her name. Not the name of a woman he worked with. Not the name of a neighbor. The name of a baby. A baby wrapped in my blanket. I called Sarah first. She didn't answer. She never answers during the day. She's a partner now. Big office, corner office. Her assistant screens everything. So I left a message. I said, "Sarah, it's Mom. I need you to come over. It's important." Then I called my other daughter, Jessie, the one who lives 40 minutes away in the town where she went to college and never left, the one who calls me every Sunday at 7, the one who still cries when she hears certain Christmas songs because they remind her of her father. Jessie picked up on the second ring. She said, "Hey, Mom, what's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." And then I said, "Everything." And then I said, "Just come. Please, come now." Jessie was at my door in 38 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. She came in wearing her scrubs because she had just finished a shift at the animal hospital. She smelled like dog shampoo and hand sanitizer. She hugged me, and I started to cry. Not the quiet tears I had been crying all morning, the ugly kind, the kind where your face crumples and your nose runs and you can't catch your breath. She sat me down at the kitchen table and she held my hands and she said, "Tell me what happened." I showed her the letter. Then I showed her the photograph. Then I watched her face change. Jessie had her father's eyes, blue, wide, the kind of eyes that looked at you like you were the only person in the room. She looked at the photograph, and she looked at me, and she looked at the photograph again, and I could see her doing the math in her head, the math that I had been too afraid to do. The date on the letter was 7 years ago. The photograph was older, much older, 30 years older, if the yellowing was any indication, which meant if the baby in the photograph was 30-something years old now, then the baby was born while Richard and I were already married, while we already had Sarah, while we already had the blanket, while I was at home changing diapers and making baby food, and thinking my husband was at work. Jessie said, "Mom, I need you to tell me something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Did you ever suspect anything?" I thought about it. I thought about the late nights, the business trips that seemed to happen more often after Sarah was born, the way he would sometimes look at me, like he was seeing someone else. The phone call he took in the garage one time at 2 a.m, the time I found a receipt in his coat pocket for a restaurant I had never heard of, a seafood place on the other side of the city. I had asked him about it. He said it was a work lunch. I believed him. I always believed him. That was my mistake. I believed him. I said no. I never suspected anything, and that was the truth. But the truth also was that I didn't want to suspect anything. I didn't want to look too closely, because looking too closely meant finding something, and finding something meant losing everything.
and I had 2 little girls, and I had a mortgage, and I had a mother who told me that marriage was about forgiveness and patience and looking the other way when you had to. So I looked the other way. For 43 years. I looked the other way so hard that I made myself blind. Jessie called Sarah. Sarah answered this time. Jessie put the phone on speaker. She said, "Sarah, you need to come to Mom's house right now." Sarah said, "I'm in the middle of a deposition." Jessie said, "I don't care. Come now." There was a long silence. Then Sarah said, "Fine," and she hung up.
While we waited for Sarah, Jessie made tea, Earl Grey, the kind Richard used to drink. She put the kettle on, and she opened the cabinet, and she took down 3 mugs. The mugs we had since the girls were in high school, the ones that said World's Best Mom and World's Best Dad. She put the World's Best Dad mug back in the cabinet and took down a plain white one. I noticed everything in that moment. The way the light came through the window, the way the dust motes floated in the air, the way the clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before, the way the photograph of the woman and the baby seemed to pulse on the table like a living thing. Sarah arrived an hour later. She was wearing a gray pantsuit, high heels, hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt. She walked into my kitchen like she was walking into a courtroom. She looked at me. She looked at Jessie. She looked at the photograph on the table. She picked it up without asking. She turned it over. She read the words. Her name was Margaret. Then she put the photograph down very carefully, like it might break. And she said, "Who is the woman?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "What do you mean you don't know?" I said, "I mean, I don't know. I never saw her before. I don't know who she is. I don't know whose baby that is. I don't know anything." Sarah said, "Dad wrote this." I said, "Yes." She said, "Dad wrote a letter saying he had a secret, and then he left a photograph of a woman and a baby, and you don't know who they are." I said, "No, I don't." Sarah sat down. She put her head in her hands. She stayed like that for a long time. Then she looked up, and her eyes were red. She said, "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to get angry." I said, "Okay." She said, "About 8 months before Dad died, he called me. He asked me to meet him for lunch, just the 2 of us. He took me to that diner on Main Street, the one with the pies, and he told me that he had made some mistakes in his life. That was the word he used, mistakes. He said he had done things that would hurt me if I knew about them. He said he was sorry. He asked me to forgive him. And I did. I forgave him without even asking what he did, because he was my father, because I loved him, because I thought forgiveness was the right thing to do. I looked at my daughter, my oldest daughter, the one with the law degree, the one who always said, 'Mom, you need to stop being so naive.' And I realized she was just as naive as me, maybe more, because at least I had the excuse of being his wife. She was his daughter. She was supposed to be off limits. She was supposed to be the one person he would never lie to. But he lied to her too. He lied to all of us. And then he asked for forgiveness without ever telling the truth, which isn't forgiveness at all. It's manipulation. It's control. It's a coward's way of clearing his conscience while keeping his secrets safe. Jessie started to cry. Not loud, just tears falling down her face while she stared at the photograph. She said, "I don't understand. I don't understand how he could do this." I said, "I don't either, baby. But we have to find out. We have to find out who that woman is, and we have to find out whose baby she's holding." Sarah made some calls. That's what Sarah does. She makes calls. She knows people. She has resources. Within 24 hours, she had the name of the woman in the photograph. Margaret was not the woman's name. Margaret was the baby's name. The woman's name was Linda Marie Covington, and she used to work at the insurance company where Richard worked. She was a secretary, a receptionist, the pretty one at the front desk who smiled at everyone and brought in cookies on Fridays and remembered everyone's birthday. She worked there for 3 years, from 1989 to 1992, and then she left. No forwarding address, no explanation. She just stopped showing up one day, and no one ever heard from her again. Sarah found Linda's last known address, an apartment building on the south side of the city, a part of town that had been nice 30 years ago, but was now full of pawn shops and check-cashing places and liquor stores with bars on the windows. Sarah drove there the next morning. I wanted to go with her, but she said no. She said, "Mom, you need to stay here. You need to be ready for whatever I find." So I stayed. I sat in my living room, the living room where I watched Richard fall asleep in his recliner, The living room where I held my granddaughters on my lap and read them stories. The living room where I had been happy, truly happy, for so many years that I lost count. Sarah came back 4 hours later. She came alone. She sat down on my couch and she took off her heels and she rubbed her feet and she said, "Mom, I found her." I said, "Linda?" She said, "Yes, Linda. But that's not her name anymore. She changed it. She goes by Lynn now. Lynn Covington. She lives in a small house, not the one in the photograph, a different one, a rental. She has a garden in the back, tomatoes, zucchini, the kind of garden Dad used to have. And she has a daughter named Maggie, Margaret, but she calls her Maggie. Maggie is 34 years old. Maggie has a husband and 2 kids, and a job at a bank. Maggie does not know that Richard was her father. I said, "What do you mean she doesn't know?" Sarah said, "I mean Linda never told her. Linda told her that her father died before she was born, a car accident. She said his name was David. She made up a whole story, a whole life, a man who never existed, because the truth was too ugly. The truth was that her father was a married man with 2 daughters who never acknowledged her, never supported her, never even sent a birthday card. The truth was that Richard knew about Maggie. He knew about her for 34 years. And he never once tried to be her father. He never once told us about her. He just left her there, like a secret, like a mistake, like something he could hide in an envelope and hope no one ever found." I thought about Maggie, 34 years old, a mother, a wife, a woman who grew up thinking her father died in a car accident, a woman who probably spent her whole life wondering what he was like, if he had her eyes, if he had her sense of humor, if he would have walked her down the aisle at her wedding. And all that time Richard was alive. All that time he was sitting in his recliner watching golf and eating his 1 egg over easy and singing along to the radio in the car. He was alive. He just chose to be dead to her. He chose to erase her. He chose to pretend she didn't exist. I asked Sarah if she talked to Linda. She said yes, for 2 hours. She said Linda was nervous at first, scared. She thought we were coming to sue her, to take her house, to ruin her life. But then Sarah told her we didn't want anything. We just wanted to know the truth. And Linda talked. She told Sarah everything. How it started at the office Christmas party in 1989. How Richard was charming and funny and made her feel special. How he said his marriage was falling apart. How he said he and I were already separated even though we weren't. How he said he was going to leave me as soon as Sarah graduated high school. How he never did. How he kept promising and promising, and then one day Linda found out she was pregnant, and she told him, and he said he would take care of everything, he would handle it. And then he did nothing. He gave her money once, $500, cash, in an envelope, and then he stopped returning her calls. He started hiding when she came to the office. He told the security guard at the front desk not to let her in. He made her feel like she was crazy, like she had imagined the whole thing, like she was the one who had done something wrong. Linda had Maggie in a hospital on the other side of the city, alone. She named her Margaret because it was her grandmother's name, nothing to do with Richard. She said she almost put her up for adoption, twice. But she couldn't do it, so she raised her by herself. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. She cleaned houses at night, she waited tables on weekends. She did whatever she had to do to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. And all that time, Richard was living in this house, in this neighborhood, driving a new car every 3 years, taking vacations to the beach, sending his daughters to summer camp, living a life that should have been Linda's life too, that should have been Maggie's life too. I asked Sarah if Linda was angry. Sarah laughed. Not a happy laugh. A hard one. She said, "Mom, Linda is beyond angry. Linda is destroyed. She spent 30 years waiting for Richard to do the right thing. 30 years. She never remarried. She never even dated seriously, because she thought one day he would come back. One day he would leave you and choose her. And then he died, and she never got to hear him say he was sorry. She never got to hear him say Maggie deserved better. She just got silence. 30 years of silence. And then a letter in an envelope that he never even sent. I asked about the blanket. Sarah said Linda didn't remember the blanket. She didn't remember where it came from. She said maybe it was a gift from the hospital. Maybe it was something she bought at a garage sale. She didn't know it was mine. She didn't know it was the same blanket I used for my own daughters. It was just a yellow blanket. A practical thing. Something to keep a baby warm. It meant nothing to her, but it meant everything to me. Because that blanket was the last thread connecting my life to Richard's other life. The life he kept hidden. The life he took to his grave. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my bedroom. The bedroom I had shared with Richard for 43 years. The bedroom where I slept alone for the last 12 years because of his snoring. I looked at his side of the bed, the indentation his body made in the mattress, the stack of books on his nightstand, the biography of Ulysses S. Grant, the one he had been reading when he died. The bookmark was still in it. Page 187. I opened the book, and I saw his handwriting in the margin. A note, a question he had written to himself. Why did Grant trust so easily? And underneath that, he had written, because he wanted to believe people were good. I closed the book, and I put it back on the nightstand, and I thought about how Richard had written that note, about a man who died 100 years ago, but he could have been writing it about me, because I trusted him, because I wanted to believe he was good, because the alternative was too terrible to imagine. The next few weeks were a blur. Sarah hired a private investigator, not because we needed to prove anything, we already knew the truth, but because she wanted to understand the full scope of Richard's lies, how deep they went, how many people knew, how many secrets he had buried. The investigator found bank statements, secret accounts, money that Richard had been siphoning from our joint savings for years. Not a lot, a few $100s here, a few hundred there, just enough to send to Linda in the beginning, just enough to pay for Maggie's diapers and formula and doctor visits. And then the payments stopped. In 1992, the same year Linda stopped working at the insurance company, the same year Richard stopped coming home on time, the same year he started drinking more, the same year our marriage changed. I always thought he was just stressed about work. I always thought he was just tired. I never thought he was grieving. I never thought he was mourning the daughter he chose to abandon. The investigator also found letters. Copies of letters that Richard had written to Linda over the years. He never sent them. He kept them in a lockbox at his office. The investigator found the lockbox after Richard died. It took him months to track it down because Richard had hidden it so well. The letters were heartbreaking. They were apologies. They were promises. They were confessions. In one letter he wrote, "I think about her every day. I wonder what she looks like. I wonder if she has my smile. I wonder if she hates me." In another letter he wrote, "I want to tell Ellie. I want to tell the girls, but I'm afraid of what I'll lose. And I've already lost so much." In the last letter, dated 2 weeks before he died, he wrote, "I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell everyone. I can't die with this secret." But he didn't tell us. He wrote a letter, and he put it in an envelope, and he tucked a photograph behind it, and he sealed it, and he gave it to a lawyer, and he died. And that was the closest he ever came to telling the truth. A letter that stayed in a box for 2 years before anyone found it. I read all the letters, every single one. I read them in my kitchen, at the same table where Richard ate his toast with grape jelly. I read them while the sun went down and the lights came on in the houses across the street. I read them while my daughters slept in the guest room because neither of them wanted to leave me alone. And when I finished the last letter, I felt something I had never felt before. Not anger, not betrayal, not sadness, emptiness, pure, total emptiness. Like someone had taken my entire life and scooped it out with a spoon and left nothing but a hollow shell. I called Linda. Sarah gave me her number. I called her on a Saturday morning. It was raining, the kind of rain that comes down sideways and soaks everything.
I sat by the window and watched the water run down the glass, and I dialed the number. She answered on the fourth ring. She said, "Hello." Just hello. No name. No, hello, this is Lynn. Just hello. And I said, "Linda, it's Ellie, Richard's wife." There was a long silence. So long I thought she had hung up. And then she said, "I know who you are." I said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And she started to cry. Not the way I cried, not quiet, loud. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed. And I cried too. 2 women on the phone. 2 women who had loved the same man. 2 women who had been lied to by the same man. 2 women who had spent decades carrying a weight that wasn't theirs to carry. And we cried together. For 20 minutes, maybe longer. I lost track. I asked if I could meet her. She said no. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. She said she needed time. She said she had spent 30 years imagining what she would say to me if we ever met. In her imagination, she screamed at me. She threw things. She blamed me for everything. But now that we were talking, she realized I was just another victim, another person Richard had used and discarded.
She said, "I don't blame you, Ellie. I blame him. And I blame myself for believing him. For so long. For too long. For longer than I should have." I told her about Maggie, about how Sarah had found her, about how Maggie didn't know the truth. Linda said she knew. She said she had been trying to find the courage to tell Maggie for years, but every time she got close, she lost her nerve. Because telling Maggie the truth meant admitting that she had lied to her daughter for 34 years. It meant admitting that Maggie's father didn't die in a car accident. He just didn't want her. He chose his other family. He chose his other daughters. He chose a life that didn't include her. And Linda couldn't bear to break her daughter's heart like that. So she kept the secret. The same way Richard kept his secret. The same way I kept my head in the sand. We were all cowards. All of us. Just different kinds. I told her I thought Maggie deserved to know. Not because I wanted to hurt her. Not because I wanted to unburden myself. But because secrets have a way of coming out eventually. And it's better to hear them from someone who loves you than from a stranger. Linda said she would think about it. She said she needed time. And then she said something that has stayed with me every day since. She said, "Ellie, I want you to know something. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to take your husband. I just wanted to be loved." And he said he loved me. And I believed him.
Because I wanted to believe him, the same way you wanted to believe him. We are the same, you and me. We both trusted a man who wasn't trustworthy, and that's not our fault. That's his. I hung up the phone and I sat in the quiet. The rain had stopped. The sun was coming out. The light through the window made everything look golden and clean. And I thought about my life. All the years I had given to Richard, all the nights I had waited up for him, all the birthdays I had planned, all the Christmases I had made perfect, all the sacrifices, all the compromises, all the times I put his needs before mine, his career before mine, his happiness before mine.
And for what? For a man who had a whole other life, a whole other daughter, a whole other woman who was waiting for him to choose her. And he never chose anyone. He just took and took and took from everyone until there was nothing left. Sarah wants me to sue the estate. She says there are grounds: fraud, concealment, emotional distress. She says we could get some of the money back, the money Richard gave to Linda, the money he hid in secret accounts. She says it's not about the money, it's about justice. But I don't want justice. I don't want revenge. I don't want anything from Richard. He's dead. He can't hurt me anymore. What I want is something he can never give me. I want the truth, the whole truth, and I want it 43 years ago, before I said yes, before I put on that white dress, before I walked down the aisle, before I gave him my youth and my body and my heart and my life. I want a do-over, but there are no do-overs. There is only this kitchen, this table, this photograph of a woman I never met, holding a baby wrapped in my blanket. I still haven't met Maggie. Linda told her the truth last month. She said it was the hardest conversation she ever had. Maggie didn't speak for 3 days. She just sat in her room and stared at the wall. And then she came out and she hugged her mother, and she said, "I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at him." And she asked if she could meet me. Linda said it was up to me. I said yes. I want to meet her. I want to look into the face of my husband's other daughter. I want to see if she has his eyes. I want to see if she has his smile. I want to see if she has the same way of tilting her head when she's confused. I want to see the person Richard threw away, the person he pretended didn't exist, the person he was too much of a coward to love. We are meeting next Sunday at a coffee shop halfway between her town and mine. She picked the place, a Starbucks near the highway, neutral ground, a place where no one knows us, a place where we can sit in the corner and talk without anyone overhearing. I don't know what I'm going to say to her. I don't know if I should apologize. I don't know if I should explain. I don't know if there are even words for what happened, for the wreckage Richard left behind, for the 2 families he destroyed. For the daughters he raised and the daughter he abandoned, for the wives he lied to, for the decades of silence, for the envelope that sat in a box for 2 years before anyone opened it. Sometimes I think about throwing the photograph away, burning it, tearing it into 1,000 pieces and scattering it in the wind. But I can't. Because the photograph is the only proof I have that my life was not what I thought it was, that the man I loved was not the man I knew, that the story I told myself for 43 years was a lie. And I need to remember that. I need to remember that when I start to miss him, when I look at his chair and wish he was still sitting in it, when I smell his cologne on an old sweater and feel my heart crack open. I need to remember the woman in the photograph, and the baby, and the blanket, and the secret he kept until the day he died. I told Sarah I'm not suing the estate. She didn't understand. She said, "Mom, he took everything from you. He took your time. He took your trust. He took your chance to have a different life. He doesn't get to win." I said, "Sarah, he didn't win. He died alone in a recliner watching golf. He died with a secret he was too afraid to tell. He died knowing that his daughter Maggie would never know him, that Linda would never forgive him, that I would never look at him the same way if I ever found out. He didn't win. He lost. He lost everything. And he lost it a long time ago. He just didn't know it yet."
Jessie is the one who understands. Jessie is the one who holds my hand when I cry. Jessie is the one who comes over every Sunday now, even though she lives 40 minutes away. Jessie is the one who said, "Mom, you don't have to forgive him. You don't have to understand him. You don't have to do anything. You just have to keep living." So that's what I'm doing. I'm living. I'm waking up every morning. I'm making my coffee. I'm folding my towels. I'm watering my plants. I'm watching the news. I'm calling my friends. I'm going to the grocery store. I'm living. But it's a different kind of living. It's the kind of living you do when you know that nothing is certain, that no one is who they seem, that the people you love the most are capable of hurting you in ways you can't imagine. It's the kind of living that comes after the fall, after the floor drops out, after you hit the bottom. It's not happy, it's not sad, it's just alive. And I guess that's enough. The envelope is on my kitchen counter now, right next to the ceramic chicken salt shaker. I look at it every day. Sometimes I open it. Sometimes I take out the photograph. Sometimes I read the letter again. Sometimes I just touch the paper he touched, the words he wrote, the confession he was too afraid to make while he was alive. And I wonder what would have happened if he had told me. If he had sat me down at this very table and said, "Ellie, I have something to tell you. There's a woman. There's a daughter. There's a life I've been living that you don't know about." Would I have stayed? Would I have left? Would I have screamed? Would I have cried? Would I have forgiven him? I'll never know. Because he didn't give me the chance. He took that choice away from me, the same way he took so many choices away from Linda, from Maggie, from Sarah, from Jesse, from all of us. I went to his grave last week, first time since the funeral. I stood there in the rain, the same rain that was falling the day I called Linda. I stood there and I looked at his name on the stone, Richard Thomas Howe, beloved husband and father, and I laughed. I stood at my dead husband's grave and I laughed until I cried. Beloved husband and father. Beloved by who? By me? By the wife he lied to for 43 years? By Sarah and Jesse? By the daughters he raised? But not by Linda, not by Maggie, not by the other woman, not by the other daughter. He wasn't beloved by them. He was a ghost to them, a secret, a shame, a man who existed only in photographs and old letters and a yellow blanket that meant nothing to anyone but me. I didn't say anything to him. I didn't pray. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't offer any. I just stood there and let the rain soak through my coat, and I thought about all the things I should have said when he was alive, all the questions I should have asked, all the times I should have trusted my gut instead of trusting him. And then I walked back to my car, and I drove home, and I made myself a cup of tea, and I sat in my living room, and I watched the rain run down the windows, and I thought about next Sunday, about meeting Maggie, about looking into the face of my husband's secret daughter, about what I will say when she asks me if her father was a good man, because that's what she's going to ask. I know she is. She's going to look at me with his eyes, and she's going to say, was he a good man? And I don't know what I'm going to say, because the truth is, I don't know anymore. I thought I knew. For 43 years, I thought I knew. But now I don't know anything, except that people are complicated, and love is complicated, and secrets are heavy, and the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just makes you lonely. The phone is ringing again. I can hear it from the kitchen. The landline, the one next to the chicken salt shaker. It's probably Sarah, or Jesse, or maybe Linda, or maybe Maggie. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. But I'm going to answer it, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. I answer the phone. I make the coffee. I fold the towels. I keep living, even when I don't want to, even when it hurts, even when the floor is gone, and I'm falling and there's nothing to catch me. I keep living, because that's what you do.
That's what you do when you're 67 years old, and your husband is dead, and your daughters are grown, and your life is not what you thought it was. You keep living. You keep living until you can't anymore, and then you keep living some more.